Welcome to the Transformation Leaders Podcast. I'm Tony Lockwood and I'm delighted that you could join me on this latest episode. Each episode takes the form of a discussion with a leader who openly shares their experiences of leading organisations through the transformation journey.
My guest today is Kurt Uhlir, a globally recognised marketer, operator and speaker. He's built and run businesses from startup to over $500 million annual revenue, assembled teams across 6 continents, been part of a small team leading an IPO, and participated in dozens of acquisitions. He advises leaders, from startup founders to private equity-backed CEOs, to the President of the United States, no less. Kurt serves as Chief Marketing Officer for Showcase IDX, which has helped real estate agents and brokers bring more than 3 million visitors to their websites in the past year. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this episode as Kurt shares his approach to delivering transformation change within organisations. Let me introduce you to Kurt now. Well, hi Kurt, welcome to the Transformation Leaders Podcast. I'm delighted that you've been able to join me today. In our discussions offline a few weeks ago, I was intrigued to learn about your experiences and approach to transformation. I'm looking forward to exploring these areas a little bit further during the show. But before we sort of get into that, let's start as we always do on these. Tell me a little bit about you and your background and I suppose how you first got into change and transformation.
I kind of stumbled into change and transformation. So I started with companies very early. I actually started 2 LLCs, 2 companies in the States when I was 14 because of taxes. But when I came out of university, I ended up joining felt like a management consulting company. So I joined a company called Navigation Technologies. It became Navtech. It's now called Here Technologies. And so anybody that has a car navigation system in their car has used routing for logistics, played a video game that's based on a real city, uses the data from that company we ended up taking public. And I didn't know it at the time, but I came out and ended up being mentored by some incredible people where at the time I joined that company in 2000. That was right when about 4 or 5 years before cell phones took off, logistics was a thing. And I ended up being at the center point for 11 industries where I would walk into a meetings with Siemens VDO that made the car navigation systems for Lexus, walk into a meeting with Bosch that did something similar, and then I would walk into UPS or FedEx Logistics with their trucks, and then into Microsoft video games with their trying to change how they build video games. And so because of that, I was at this linchpin of all these industries and mentored by some incredible people, both transforming internal, but also being at the place where so many industries were transforming and being part of that.
Wow, great experience. Great experience. And how do you define the word transformation then? Because it sounds like you've got so many in those early days, so many experiences. And we all have our own definition of the word transformation. How do you define it?
It depends on the organization. It is a malleable word. And so for most companies, I think they look at transformation where they see technology or they see how, say, maybe content's created in marketing. They see this massive change happening and they know that they need to change how they've been doing things for 5 years or 50 years. And I think that's how most companies tend to approach transformation. And that's true. I think there's another category where I help with a lot in addition to that first one, and that's companies that are trying to unlock hypergrowth. Mm-hmm. And so you never unlock hypergrowth by just trying to grow by 2% or 20% a year. So I'm at my second hypergrowth company right now. Lots of companies try it. Almost you never actually do it. But I'm at a real estate company now, which uses a lot of technology, but they didn't even exist 20 years ago. And they're now the largest independent real estate company in the US and the world. They're operating in 22 countries. They didn't even exist 20 years ago. That's a transformation from an industry perspective with a new company coming in, trying to get this scale. And you can try to unlock high growth and transform things, whether you're a 5-year-old company or a 50-year-old company, but you're looking for an inflection point that says, how we've been doing things has been good, but we need to find a way, or we're trying to find a way to unlock something completely different, which is really an inflection point. And they're both transformation, but you also approach different ways.
No, absolutely. And some of the biggest companies in the world, as you say, haven't been around for 20, 30 years. Amazon, I was reading something the other day and it was talking about Uber, biggest taxi firm in the world, but they don't have any taxis, et
Right.
cetera, et cetera. There's so many of these new organizations over the last sort of couple of decades that have completely changed the way that we operate on a day-to-day
Right.
basis. And it'd be interesting just to explore those lessons from those hyper growth businesses that you've been involved in, that you feel that can more established businesses can take advantage of. Can you sort of pick up two or three of those?
Yeah, we can talk about some of those examples. And sometimes you can do the same. You can try for both those types of transformation at the same company. And so I mentioned at Navtech, we did this at Navtech where it really was an automotive company. And so we went public. When we went public, we had an $880 million IPO. I'd say 90 to 95% of our revenue came from automotive at that point. And so at that point, we were having to transform internally. Automotive, there's nothing wrong with it. I actually still love the industry, but even today, it's old and slow. I
Mm.
mean, there's a reason that people are in bringing in more wireless technology, but it's like you want to get a head unit installed in a new Volvo. I mean, that might be a 10-year discussion before it actually goes into a vehicle. And so we had to go from a company that was built to support those type of organizations to not only bring on new salespeople, but train our pricing teams, our legal teams about how to work with the mobile industry. And so we had people that were trying things where they're like, I have an idea for a map. We the first thing we had was, for those of us that have a few more years on us, like you and me, like MapQuest back in the day, where you were doing routes before we had all on our phones. Well, in that case, like they're using our data, and initially, like nobody knew what it was, so we just kind of had a fixed fee price with them. Well, I saw where the industry was going, and I'm like, this is data's changing, mobile devices are coming. I'd really rather be paid every time somebody does a route.
Yeah.
Well, it was a huge transformation internal from a business thinking to expose our team to saying, yeah, we're getting paid large amounts of money internal, what we thought, but to say, look, let's go to a variable model. That's an internal transformation and change management discussion at a board level well before we could actually go to MapQuest. And so that was, years ago back in the day where there used to be a time every time you just looked up a map, we got paid like a tenth of a cent. If you did a route, we got paid a tenth of a cent, and some maps came with that. Well, that gave us a variable revenue stream where we were able to grow in the industry group, but at the same time trying to transform from automotive to just deal with new wireless. Helped spin up the internal Skunkworks team because it was a large organization, so you can do transformation in multiple ways. And so part of what that separate innovation team was how do we grow enough revenue that we could put the rest of the business out of business.
Yes, yeah.
And when you're a bigger company, you can and should be looking at some transformation goals like that, whether it's cost savings or it's new revenue opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's Google, isn't it, that has written into people's contracts that 10 or 20% of their time should be about focusing upon new things, and that skunk work type of activity, really, of bringing in that information, innovative new products or new areas to develop, really incentivizing that creation.
Yeah, I like that approach from Google. How they implement it isn't always the best way, in my opinion. Overall, it's been kind of good for them, but they're still, if you've ever been in the walls of Google, and I've spent quite a bit of time and coached some of the senior leaders there, they're very authoritative. They lead by authority, and so they give people some of this free time to let these experiments run, and sometimes they end up working really well, and sometimes they don't. But I think a different way of approaching that is from a servant leadership approach, where you should explain to your team, whether you're a 50-person team or a 5,000-person team, you should let them know the outcomes that the company is trying to accomplish, and whether it's you give them a fixed percentage of time or not, you should trust them. And so, from the autocratic type of leadership tends to be do exactly what I say in the way I do it, or there's the door. You can get out. And then some companies like Google will give you some percent of time to test things. Well, the servant leadership approach takes that much more and says, look, like, I'm going to give you this time, but even when it's on doing exactly what I told you to do, I trust you, Tony, because you're wise. I brought you into the company to do this role, whether you're somebody doing tickets for a customer support ticket, or you're the customer success team manager, or you're the CTO. I brought you in because you meet some characteristics, and you're going to make so many micro decisions on a daily basis. Let's look at the outcomes we're trying to accomplish and come back to us if you think that there's things we're not paying attention to, or the ways we could do that differently. When you create that type of culture, it's not, you don't even have to bring in a transformation consultant like some of us. At that point, you've created a culture where everybody is always looking for new ways to help the company accomplish their outcomes.
Yeah. No, I'm a great believer personally of that outcome-focused activity in every stage within organization development. Whether you, as you say, whether you are a relatively small team in a relatively low value part of the organization, if you're managing that team, you get far more out of that team if you're clear about the outcomes and support them, but let them get on with it and breed that innovation, or allow them to experience things themselves, rather than being that autocratic, you'll do it in this way. And because fundamentally, let's manage the outcomes and not manage the inputs is a big part of, I think, what drives that.
Well, and when a company does that, I find transformation, it not only does it come naturally, you find better outcomes, and you hit better goals, because so often we all have these internal biases that we don't realize, or hidden assumptions. I kind of joke, I'm generally wrong about, like, fundamentally wrong about 3 things in my business today, like the parts that I have purview over. And I don't know that I'm wrong about them, because the thing that people don't realize is when you're wrong and when you're right, it feels exactly the same until you actually find out that you were wrong in a thinking. Yeah. And so I've been on patent applications where we've changed like the last like 100 yards of delivery for logistics for industries, because in the milieu of transformation of the technology we came up with, that was a company called Package Room. We came up with a new way for especially in apartments or office building, to have open shelves as opposed to lockers, so that when somebody comes in, the delivery person puts down the package, we can identify the exact package, and Tony, you can just walk up and grab it. Well, if you look at the people that are on the inventors along with me, one of them was our office manager that helped, that was also an admin to the CEO. Well, because she was as instrumental in the milieu of the transformation when we were coming through the issues, that I felt we should add her as an inventor. And I had to kind of convince some others for that, because she raised questions. Like, we thought we were right, and we were right on a different way of doing things, but she would raise questions about the experience in a way that we never would have come to the change of that technology that not involves cameras, weight sensors, open shelves, security in and out of rooms and stuff. If it wasn't for her and us being open to allowing her to come into that conversation, the product would have been good. It still would have been industry changing, but it wouldn't have been nearly as great as the transformation that we're seeing now, not only with that early stage company, but also now across the industry as it's starting to be implemented elsewhere.
Yeah, and it is having that within your team, having that person or group of people that are either real customers or real clients, but certainly people that are in the shoes of the customer, looking at things through the eyes and through the lens of the user or the customer, isn't it? And I'm sure, as you say, you can get caught up in the technology and what the technology has the ability to do, but if no one's prepared to go up and pick things up and check things, it's a useless technology, isn't it? And there's been so many examples of things that have been theoretically really innovative, but no one's used them, or what it was developed to do in the first place was deemed to be a failure, but then someone picked that up and said, actually, it could be deployed in this area. And a massive success comes on the second wave. Fascinating. So within those transformations that you've been involved in, and especially around those sort of fast growth businesses, one of the challenges generally in large scale transformations is just keeping momentum over a relatively long period of time. Within those fast growth businesses, how do you keep the momentum, not necessarily the transformation because there'll be stages, but how do you keep the momentum going? Once you've gone through the first wave of growth to get to the next wave, to the next wave.
Great question. And great word of momentum. I think that's the term that needs to be within the organization, because I think too often companies come into and leaders, and especially visionary CEOs, they make the mistake of thinking we have the solution, we've rolled it out, the world should just happen. Like, why aren't we growing at 2,000% right now? And as opposed to, like, all transformation starts with a decision and an initial rollout, but you need to keep everybody thinking about that term momentum. And so for me, that ends up happening really in two real ways. And it doesn't matter the industry, or even the technology or not technology. Sometimes we're changing processes from a transformation perspective. It comes from product marketing for continuing to market, whether they're externally and you're shaping that experience, and especially bringing in the success stories of new users, and as you continue the transformation, the ongoing time. I always want to be, if I'm 2 years into a transformation, I always want to have real superhero stories from people who have just started to implement the change, as well as people that are 12 months, 18 months in the transformation and how that's happened right then. Right now, I'm in real estate. And so while I do still do executive coaching, I help with the number, I'm working in a hypergrowth company, as I mentioned, that didn't exist 20 years ago. Well, we had some really cool technology we're rolling out, very early stage, patent pending. But the biggest movers right now are actually something just around referrals, something that's kind of unsexy in a lot of ways. It's one agent within the same brand wanting to make a referral to another agent. Well, we looked at it and we were like, well, it's just taking those agents up to 45 minutes to make a referral, where it should just be, hey, Tony, I'm gonna send you this client. It's going to be a good business. You can help solve their problems if they choose to work with you, and we both make money. And there's a lot more to it, but the client's always in the end of the end. That's just 45 minutes. Well, we came up with an internal technology to take that down to 45 seconds or less to make that introduction and broker that deal. That's huge. But I have tens of thousands of referrals that have already taken place on that platform, and I rolled it out in March. I'll do 20 to 30,000 within this first year. My numbers should be way higher at this internal tool we're rolling out, but it's only from now telling the stories repeatedly, not of, hey, the 45 minutes to 45 seconds. It's of, I've done this before. How it gets adopted more throughout the organization, and perhaps it goes industry wide, is I don't tell what the technology does. I tell how it's transforming the individual people's lives. Yeah. Some cases, it's an individual agent with an individual referral. And it's also coming out, and like, I have a story where somebody came to us proactively, which is where you have to go ask for permission. And they went, I was about to sign a multi-$1,000 contract just to pay like a DocuSign to manage stuff that we were doing this manually. Can I really do this for just in the internal tools? Yeah. And then the follow-up was, can I go share this testimony and go share this story, throughout the wider organization? So it's building momentum, but by knowing, hey, look, you're just by rolling out the solution, the transformation, the technology, that's not how you get the growth. You're going to hit your peak level, the maximum value in the transformation by launching it and looking for momentum over time. At some point, it will cap out, but it's always way longer period than what that visionary CEO will think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, as you say, having those mini wins and keep communicating those mini wins, and also accepting that people move along that journey at different speeds, and everyone goes through that change curve. So I was starting to think in terms of that example you were just saying about the new technology for those referrals. If people are used to working and it's taking 45 minutes, and you're saying, I can do something a lot quicker than that, 45 seconds, a lot of people will go, whoa, that's not for me. And you've got to overcome that because through that that change curve, and some people will move that through that a lot quicker. But what tends to happen, what I find, is that people move through that change curve a lot quicker when they can see other people have done it. So you get that first movers,
Right.
and then you get your people that actually, yeah, it does work, doesn't it? Let's quickly
Right.
follow on. And it is that
Yeah.
learning from people doing and communicating those successes, isn't it, that keeps that momentum going.
Yeah, that very much applies in both things that are kind of tackling older problems, but just like with a transformation where we're bringing in a digital tool with it to do things, and applies even that much more where I mentioned this patent pending technology that we're building. I wish that I had 7 words or 17 words that I could say, and all of the potential customers would just understand it, but I don't. And so I've got some massive success stories internal. And so as we're progressively rolling it out, part of my challenge is then trying to find those 17 words. Like, it's industry changing technology. And so there's not something I can point to that says it's just like this, or here's 7 other companies we've done this with. And so my customers, as I'm getting their success stories, I'm actually working both testing language with them to explain it to the wider masses, as well as hearing from them how they're trying to explain it to others. And so to get to something that's truly like blue ocean different, you have to find the verbiage for that not just the common like man or woman, but the common man or woman in any different customer type. Even if your company solves a solution for certain industry for companies 50 to 100 million in sales, there's still a lot of different types of customers in there, early adopters and laggards. And you need to find the messaging, especially for new transformations, that people are going to understand. And your early adopters will help you with that, but you actually need to plan on rolling it out progressively so that people understand it. You mentioned Uber earlier. Like, yeah, Uber we're all aware of now, and Lyft. But the first one that really did that in the States was a small company called Sidecar in San Diego area that, like, no, the common person has no idea who they were. And even today, like, they kind of had a little run for things. Well, they were new. And it's like, it come up with the coolest idea that could transform an industry or company. If you don't have that right wording, or you don't stage your transformation, your rollout properly, it's going to fail.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many examples where the really great ideas, the people that come up with the ideas and go and try to launch it, run out of money, run out of energy, etc., etc. And it's the second mover advantage that picks it up and runs with it and
Right.
makes a success of it. One of the things that I'm always talking about in these shows is having a North Star, having a vision, having that outcome. And to use your satellite navigation background, I use that analogy a lot. You know, you go in, you set your destination, but as you're going along that path, it's never a straight path, and you've got to keep understanding what's happening in the world, what's happening in your business, and making diversions to ensure that you get to an outcome. What lessons have you got, and can you share in helping people to track the progress and make sure that you are actually ending up getting to the desired outcome, or as close to that desired outcome as possible?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a couple different things. One is to get momentum, it almost always takes longer and more time than what people would like, especially that, kind of sometimes the visionaries, or sometimes the venture or private equity groups behind a company where they're leading the transformation. And so it's usually going to take longer than you think, but that's because, like, you need to get a product, you need to get the tools, the change, whether it's processes or technology, into people's hands. And to your point, see the data. And so I, like with the navigation example, I kind of give, like, I can look at a mountaintop across me right now and I can say, hey, Tony, we're going to go climb to the top of that. Well, we see where we're going to end up, to your point, but how we might get there, we might have to change direction a lot as we move through the valley. Well, that only comes from an agile approach. This old style approach of a waterfall, let's plan out the full roadmap for the next 12 months or 24 months. Like, I do like having a general framework of like, we're going to that mountaintop and here's how we're going to go. But I need to acknowledge, and everybody, you have to get buy-in and say, look, as we're building this technology, we're changing the processes. We have some pretty good viewpoints, but we also need to be very okay that the plan in 30 days or in 60 days may look very different than what we thought it was going to look like based on the data. I mentioned on that referral app thing. I mean, we're seeing the results. It's incredible watching it happen right now. But like even just yesterday, I was asking with people and they're like, but I thought you said I could search for other agents this way. Well, they were in a different part of the product that has a mini search, that not the full search. And like we wouldn't have realized it actually if we weren't having mastermind sessions with agents that are actually using it. And so I find that value both the conversation and something like a hot jar or a full story that does screen recordings of its technology. Oh my gosh, the most humbling thing for anyone is saying, like, go watch what your users were actually doing in the product, and you realize, yeah, to your point of navigation, where the destination is, you're going to have to change a lot to get there. So it takes just time and consistency. And most people don't, they want it faster, and that's okay. But like that problem is too, they bring in somebody who's a transformation expert, who's done this repeatedly, like people in your community, and they have such an appetite for wanting to get to that outcome faster that they get 9 months or 12 months into what actually any of us, you or me, would come in and be like, they're on a great path. But the CEO or board's like, yep, I'm going to change transformation experts because it's not as fast as I want. Where like you or I would go, that's actually incredible and better than you should be planning on. Keep that person.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think I agree that agile approach is definitely the way forward. But a lot of leaders, a lot of leadership teams want to see the end-to-end route and put change control around it because they've got a budget, etc., etc. And it's the ability to break those budgeting cycles or sign-off cycles into manageable chunks, that as opposed to trying to get from A to B in just one group in one jump. I think that's the difference, and in the transformations I've been involved in and people I've spoken to, that when you've got a leadership team that is prepared to think in 90 days, 120-day chunks, and sign things off on that basis, you can get to that end point a lot quicker than if you try to spend all the time getting the full route from A to B or A to Z or whatever the route is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think to be successful leading transformation within an organization, you have to have the verbiage of being able to speak to the CFO, the accountant in the company, and explain to them, like talk to them in a way where they're hearing risk and return. But on the other side, it's also they care about risk. And so it's being able to talk to them in a way that they're used to seeing in older industries and 30 years ago, and go, well, yes, I can give you a 2-year roadmap and we can talk through that. But this is our general path that we're going to have going towards that mountaintop or towards the address in your navigation system. But the chance of doing it that way and finding success, if we follow that, the failure rate is going to be 95%. Yeah. As opposed to, this is our sketch of how we're going. We agree we're going west, and that's the mountaintop, and we're going to reevaluate that every time. And you, Mr. or Mrs. Accountant that's in charge of the checkbook, which is what every board essentially is you reframe that conversation for them in terms of you're making an investment to get an outcome, but there's always a risk calculation. And that old style approach has a very high failure. And our agile approach, it does two things. One is it increases the chance of success by the exact opposite. My agile approach is going to have a success of transformation of maybe 90 to 95%. And as opposed to thinking about KPIs of just the outcome numbers, hey, look, what we actually want to track that's going to tell us what we're getting there is not, say, the number of leads. We're going to track leading indicators. And you reframe from very beginning for them that, yes, here's the outcomes we want, but those outcomes at the numbers you want are going to happen out maybe years in the future. But you can still know are we on track towards that by leading indicators? And it takes a lot of time to walk somebody through what the leading indicators are and where they're going to end up at.
Yeah, and a lot of times that investment in taking the leadership team through that process and that thought process is massively undervalued and just not done, because the focus always is on the business and the organization and what we need them to do, and a lot of the time it's what we need the leadership team to be doing, isn't it? That's the key. So
and it's an easy conversation. It's an easy conversation that I think too many transformation leaders are scared of having. Like they consider the woman or man holding the checkbook, they kind of almost consider them the enemy, when opposed to you need to learn how to have a conversation with them. I speak with my spouse differently than I speak with my best friend sometimes. And I'll razz my best friends. And I won't talk to my wife that way. And so like every accountant, every CFO of a public company, if you ask them about, if they're in an inventory business, you can ask them about leading indicators that's going to show that they won't have enough inventory on the shelf to complete sales in the retail outlets. And they can just rattle off the leading indicators that say that they would look at and that they can audit and go, well, that's what we're going to do with this internal system as well. And you have to draw that connection for them. And when you invest that time up front, you realize they're not your enemy. They're your ally. And when I've taken the time to do that, I actually find out that my budgets usually increase because they have faith in the leading indicators and they don't feel like we're arguing all the time. I've let them know up front, and I've let them push back and argue and say, yeah, but I don't agree with that leading indicator. Okay, well, let's have that conversation.
Brilliant. I love that. Love that. So just coming towards the end, every transformation, small, large, traditional business, new business, can be stressful for people. So one of the questions that we ask often is, what do you do to alleviate stress? And for those, obviously, a lot of the people that will be watching this or listening to this will be doing it through a podcast medium as opposed to video. And I can see where you're sitting at the moment, and I don't think you could get stress where you're sitting at the moment. But what do you do to alleviate your stress?
A few things. So I kind of actually do three things. One is I do take time for intentional rest. It goes in my calendar for my family as well. And you have to plan for that, because those of us that are doing big things, we get passionate about it. If you don't intentionally rest, you're not going to rest. But I'm involved in two different types of communities that are very healthy for me. The first is I have a small group of, in my case, men around me that know everything kind of work-wise and personal-wise and faith-wise that are going on with me. I do happen to be friends with most of those, but the goal is not friendship. The goal is transparency about the struggles that we're all going through, so that we can talk to each other about that. And the second part is very business focused. I have other transformational leaders and like a community like you lead and pull together that I have. And I think that's so important for people, that in transformation, we're always dealing with the ethereal. And so not everybody is able to either, one, understand the chaos that sometimes feels like, or the struggles of talking with leadership. And being in a community of, in my case, I've got a group of people that I can go to. And what I'm so interested that we're talking about, and I'm actually going to look at your communities as well, is being able to speak to people that are exactly like me, either in my industry and others, is actually been hugely valuable for me keeping motivated myself, because it's very healthy for me and keeps me motivated when I may be down because I came out of a very difficult discussion with a senior leadership team, and you're in that same frame, or you can empathize because you were there 2 months ago with the client.
No, and I think that is so powerful. And as you say, the Transformation Leaders Hub, which is the community I set up, it was one of the catalysts for doing it was exactly that. Any leader, whether you're a CEO, CFO, or leading a big transformation, can be a very lonely existence, because you don't want to show to the wider team your vulnerabilities. And sometimes you do need to show those vulnerabilities and have someone that, as you said, was there 2 weeks ago, 3 months ago, and just to talk to. they're not going to give you answers or whatever, but the fact that you're now not on your own and you can share those experiences and make them probably a little bit lighter and et cetera, is so valuable. And I think is critical for the mental health of people and stress. So it's great to hear that you've got that network as well that you utilize. So just we end these podcast sessions with one final question. It's always the same question, but if you can sort of pull everything together, all your experiences together into one key lesson, what would that be? What's the one thing that you would leave our listeners with today?
You're doing transformation because you're really good at finding solutions and changing things. But kind of touch on it is that there are still several things you're wrong about right now. And that every day you should be looking and asking the questions about what you might be wrong about. Because if you can identify that 6 months earlier, you have just compressed the time for both you as an individual as a change act, but also for the whole organization. And so being open to, I might be wrong. I don't need to dwell on it. I want to ask that question a little bit and let my teams know that we're asking that question because we're wrong about something. We just need to figure it out sooner.
No, great one. And interestingly enough, it reminded me. I'm doing a piece of work with a large chemical manufacturing business at the moment, and every formal meeting, the first 5 minutes of every meeting is a safety moment. We talk about safety because it's such a critical part. And I was on a call earlier on this week, and the safety moment was about blind spots in vehicles, and they put this diagram up showing you where a blind spot typically is in a vehicle. And I've taken that because I'm going to use it all the time because exactly what you've just said. It's being clear and thinking about, if you're going down this road through your transformation, think about your blind spots and think about what's going to come and hit you or stop you or slow you down. The more you can think about it and challenge that, the quicker you'll actually get to your destination.
Absolutely.
Well, Kurt, that's really great. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a delight to have you on the show. Hopefully you found it of interest. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way of doing that?
My personal website is my hub that splinters off to anything else. So Kurt, KurtUhlir.com. There's a bunch of free materials on there for people about change management, transformation, and servant leadership that we talked about.
Well, thank you very much. I'll put that link in the show notes. Kurt, once again, thank you so much for your time and energy throughout this episode. There are a few nuggets that I'm going to go and implement immediately, so I'm sure there'll be many elements our listeners can take from this show. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We are always interested in hearing from you. What do you find useful from this pod? What do you want us to explore more in the future? Please do press the subscribe button. It helps us to reach more people and share the experiences of all my guests. The Transformation Leaders Hub community offers a variety of benefits for individuals looking to develop their leadership skills and drive positive change in their organisations and communities. Here are some of the main benefits of joining. Number 1, access to exclusive content. As a member, you'll have access to a wealth of resources, including exclusive content, expert-led workshops, webinars, and more. 2, professional development. Our community is designed to support your personal and professional growth, offering opportunities to learn new skills, gain valuable insights, and connect with like-minded individuals. Number 3, networking opportunities. Connect with other change and transformation leaders from a diverse range of industries and backgrounds and build relationships that can help you drive positive change in your organisation or community. Number 4, a supportive community. Our community is welcoming and supportive space for individuals to share their experiences, exchange ideas, and learn from one another. And finally, inspiration and motivation. Interact with other change and transformation leaders, share your experience, and draw inspiration and motivation from the successes and challenges of others. By joining the Transformation Leaders Hub community, you'll have access to all of those benefits and more. You'll be part of a community that is dedicated to driving positive change and then transforming the world through effective leadership. Sign up today. So with that, thank you for joining us today on this podcast. I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.